Alright, so we have everything sculpted, and we have it all in here. I wanted to show you that I did a couple of little things differently, just so to show you it doesn't matter how you get it done as long as it gets done. First off, I was having problems with this one that I sculpted in a different object. It kept crashing. So what I did is I exported it and then imported it back into Zbrush and then just placed it over the top of this. I probably could have used the bake, but decided that we'll just do it this way just to show you it can be done. Then the other one here is I took this object and I basically just sculpted it out from there. I made a separate plane just to sculpt this detail in. So okay, so we have it set up. We just need to export it now. Probably want to down-res it because it's about 5 million polys, 5.5 million. So we're going to down-res it. But before we do that, we need to do one more thing. We need to look at it and say that we have polygroups on this. And we kind of want to keep those polygroups, but let's clean them up in here before we do the next part. So what we'll do is we'll use our control and mask and just come through here. And maybe turn off the paint at this point. And then we can go to the side and just do like Alt to get it everything but that for this one. Pretty easy. There we go. And we'll Control Shift F, and remember in Control Alt or Control W will change the color of it. So Control W when you have a selection. Then I'm going to come to here, and this one I can't really use the I guess I could do it the old school way. The old thought process here is just doing it this way, like this. Let me turn this off again. And then doing the Alt to deselect areas like this. Move this over and like this. We'll just do it like that. That's it's always something. So we're going to get rid of all that extra lip stuff. In fact, I'm just going to leave it for now. I would take the time and really do it, and that's what you need to get used to thinking like. Control W, we'll check our, they're different. Come up here, they all look pretty different. They all look different. So I've got that. Then I'm going to come down here to this one, and this one we're pretty sure is all good. How about this one? This one should be pretty good with those separate, but I'm going to go ahead and make each of those box areas their own polygroup. So I'll do this, Control W. This is fine. I'm going to do this. And I probably should do it with that box in case I get, so I get a perfect square, max. So this goes from the center. I love it when the square is from the center, but the rectangle's from the sides. Sure, they have brilliant reasons for doing everything, but Control W, and then we'll do it again from the center here. Get this as much as I can, and if you have to move it after you started doing this, you just hold the space bar just like in Photoshop. And then Control W. So now I've got those all separate groups, these all separate groups, everything's good. So what we've done before is, you know, done a merge down, but we don't want to do that. I don't really want to be destructive with what I have here, so I'm going to come over to the subtool menu and go down to the merge menu. And inside the merge menu, I'm going to push merge visible. When I merge visible, it doesn't look like it did anything. In fact, all my pieces are still here, but what it actually does is makes a whole new piece right up here. And I want to name this because it's important that whatever we export, it's going to keep that name. So we're going to say trim sheet high. Okay. Then I need to do one more thing. I need to make sure I have a plane to export it so they're exactly matching. I can either import it from Max and do it that way, but you know me, if I already have a plane here, we know it's unwrapped, it's a plane, it's simple. So I'll come over to this plane, I'll take a look at it, it looks pretty fine. So what we'll do is we will name this one trim sheet low. Okay. Come back over to the high res one, say insert, and now we can look for the name, trim sheet low. I probably grabbed that one, wrong size, this one. Now this one's not the right size either, or not right placement either, but it is the right size at least. So if I say transparent, and then I come to the side, and I just move this up, like that, and we make sure it's got the top and the bottom, so no perspective on, and we make sure that it goes over a little bit on the top, because the bottom, if we clip, that's fine. And then we want to move it backwards, because I like to, when I do mine, I like to make sure that they're clipping only for, I mean, that I'm only worried about the front end of the box. And if I have to, I can do the back. But I'm going to pull this back to about right there. Maybe a little further. Like there. Okay, so now I've got my low res, I've got my high res. Now what? Well, I've got them all separated in colors too. So I want to make sure that I down res this, right? So we need to down res this one before we send it out, because we don't want a 4.8 million poly thing going out. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to go to Polypaint. Everything you do in Zbrush is in Polypaint is based off of vertices. So the more vertices you have, the more resolution you get. But we don't need that for right now. I just want you to understand that it's using vertices to make Polypaint. So if I open up Polypaint, this menu right here, you'll see there's one option we're going to use. It's called Polypaint from Polygroups. So great, we have everything polygrouped, and we're going to do this. The reason we need to do this, by the way, is because in Decimation Master, if I don't select anything, it's going to delete all my polygroups. But you'll see in here, there's no Polygroups option, but there is a Polypaint option. So if we can get the Polypaint to give us the polygroups, then we're good. So I'm going to use that, and then I'm going to click over here and say Polypaint from Polygroups. And there you go, super fast, and this is the point you save it. You always want to, make sure it's set up before you do crazy things like this decimation. So I'm going to say pre-process current and pause it and be right back. Okay, so the pre-processing, the hard part's done. Notice that I didn't change anything in here. The poly weight is at 25, I assume that's percent. I'm just going to go ahead and decimate it to 20% the default real quick. As we know, the Polypaint, or the pre-processing, is the thing that takes the longest, because now we're already down to 960. So perfect, we have our low res and our high res. What we can also do is, since you can bring either of the, you can either bring polygroups into Zbrush to get color IDs, or you can bring texture maps or materials into Zbrush for color IDs. When you export something as an FBX, it keeps the materials all on there. So this technically is going to be looked at as materials by default, but we can also tell it to overwrite that and go to polygroups. I'm going to show you both only because I want you to know there's two options here. So if I come back to polygroups, you'll see that, let me turn off my subtools. If you want to know how, all you have to do is turn off the paintbrush and that makes it go away. Or you can turn off the Polypaint or the colorize button and it makes the same thing as the paintbrush. But we're going to come in here and we're going to go to Polygroups, and inside of Polygroups, lo and behold, there's a Polygroups from Polypaint. So I probably need to turn it back on real quick. Colorize, and then come back to Polygroups, and then we're going to say Polygroups by Polypaint from Polypaint. And we'll take a look, and let me see if I turn that Polypaint off. Yep, there we go. Now we're all polygrouped again. Okay, so we have both versions, and I'm going to export two. First one I'm going to export is the one with the Polypaint on. All right, so we'll come down here. Oops, I guess I just turn on this paintbrush. Oops, not that one. This one. Okay, so this one I've selected. It's default. I'm going to hide the other one just because I always like to hide the one I'm not exporting anyway. So I'm going to say F. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to say, I'm going to click on FBX export import. If the options are not open, that don't have to open them, but right here, because by default it's going to make these as materials. So I'm going to export selected. I'm going to call this tech trim high res 2. Save. And I'll be back when it's done. Okay, so it's exported it. Now I need to do it again, but this time I'm going to hide this Polypaint. And this time I'm going to come down to my options and open it up and say Polygroups as materials. This is more common than not the way you do it, but in this case we decimated and we needed to get that back. So we're going to say, again, export, but Polygroups as materials. So go like this, and we'll come back to trim high and say save. And say replace it, and I'll be right back when it's done. Okay, it's done. Take this low res, select it, and say export. Doesn't matter about that. Say export. We're going to go low res right there. Save. This doesn't take but a second, so we'll come back to substance. Say select, and we'll say low res, and say open, and say okay. It's already unwrapped because it's a base, poly plane, so we're good there. Okay, so we brought it in. Now we're going to go ahead and bake it. So we're going to come over to the baking, and we're going to say bake mesh maps, and then we're going to pick this button right here, pick our low res, our high res real quick, and we're going to call that high res 2. We're going to turn off our ID. I just want to show you the basic bake, and I'm going to leave it at default and show you, because I've had a couple of people have problems with their bake looking clipped or something. So we're just going to leave it at default and see how off it is. And there you go. Look how that looks. What that means is that the invisible cage, the pretend cage that it's put around this, is not working. So we're going to come back in here. It doesn't have enough depth. I know by default, because I've tested it, 5 should be fine. 0.05, very small amount, and then go ahead and do it again. And there we go. I think we got everything. Got to look at these. Look at these pieces to see, because they're the ones that stick out the furthest. So looks pretty good. Okay, so we got this. Now we don't have our ID map, so how do we fix that problem? Well, we're going to go back into bake, and I'm going to show you the 2 ways to do it. So I'm going to say none, so we select nothing but the bake, or but this map. I'm going to leave it on 2 because that's the default one. I'm going to come over to ID, and you're going to see inside of ID it's defaulted to vertex color. Remember what I told you about vertex color? That's the way that Zbrush paints. So it should be good if we just bake with the vertex color. And if you want to look at it, you can roll over it and look and see there's our ID map. Looks pretty close, pretty good. They should all be different colors. You really kind of want these to be different colors in here, but if you wanted to, you could take it in Photoshop and make sure they're drastic, because when you use the masking by ID, the further away they are from another color, the easier it is to make them masked closer and tighter. But let's do it one more time. We're going to say mask. We're going to get rid of this one. We're going to do it twice because I like the ID one better. But we're going to come over here and change it from vertex color to material color, because remember we told it to change the polygroups to material ID, or to material, number. So we're going to say bake mesh maps again and do, oh crap, cancel, nothing. Because I didn't change the model, right? So I'm going to go back in here, say F3, and then bake again. And there it is. So I don't like the way it did this. It does work very well sometimes, but in this case, it's just so similar that when I start using IDs, I'd almost have to bring this in Photoshop. So in this case, we're going to actually use the other one. So we're going to go back in here one last time, remove this one, go in here and say high res 2, make sure we change the settings to use vertex color, and bake it. Okay, so it worked, and if you want to see what your IDs look like on your object, all you have to do is make a fill layer real quick, open this up, go to your project, and you'll see all the maps you just baked are sitting right there. Or let's put this down here like we do for class. We'll see they're all right there, and I'm just going to come over to the base color of this object and throw it into there. And there you go. So we can see all of these are separate. They all seem to be good. If there's a little bit of fall off, it's not too bad. So we're ready for the next step, and I'll see you in the next video.